My name is Guise. As you can tell by the title, I'm a conceptual designer, and I'll be talking to you today about conceptualising for film, and also for other things like television and where the future is going as well. And it's, I suppose the best way to start is actually tell you a bit about myself and who I am. When I was at the age of 4, I saw a film and I loved it. I can still remember it. Spy Loved Me, James Bond film. And the only part I remember was a ship, and of all things was the scene of James Bond and the girl kissing at the very end. For some reason I remembered that. And I really loved films from that age on. And at the age of 8 I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I knew straight away I want to do this for a living. You know, other people are saying I want to be doctors, I want to be vets. I wanted to make movies from the age of 8. Unfortunately, at that time, New Zealand didn't really have the film industry making the kind of films I wanted to make. There were lots of good films like Goodbye Pork Pie and all of those kind of films out there. But in my opinion, I wanted to make films which were like the Hollywood films, the big action spectaculars that you go to see, like James Bond, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, things like that. And the films that I saw in New Zealand at the time were what I called mud farming films, where everyone seemed really depressed and were farming mud. And those were the kind of things that I wanted to make. So I didn't know where to go in New Zealand to do those kind of films. And so I spent most of my life, my working career at the start, working in places like Kmart for 3 years, selling TVs. From there I went into the radio industry, and I was a radio announcer for 2 years, doing the 6 to midnight shift on a little radio station and taking requests from drunks late at night. And then after that, I became a cartoon portrait artist in a shopping mall, because I'd always been drawing all of my life, and I thought, you know, I don't want to take the dole, I hate taking money for doing nothing, so I tried doing cartoon portraits, and I made a living from that for a year. And during that period, that's when The Frighteners came out, and I said, holy crap, that's a Hollywood film, and that was made in New Zealand. You know, this is the kind of film I want to make. I've got to find out who made this film. And I found out about Weta Workshop and Richard Taylor and Tanya Rocket, and I said, okay, I'll go along to them. They probably won't want me, but I'll see what I can do. And so I put together a CV of everything that I could imagine that they might be able to find a use for me. So I saw that they'd done Meet the Feebles in the past, so I did a little puppet of Peter Jackson. And I sort of put together, I've never done sewing or anything like that before, but I thought, I'll give it a go, what the hell. And then I sculpted a werewolf. I'd never done sculpting before, but I gave it a go. See how that goes. Then I saw they might be working on King Kong, like the little head of King Kong, and I put that in. I drew Skull Island based off the original thing in pencil sketch, and I did all these kind of things just on the off chance that one of these things might hit with Richard. And I took it all in a big washing basket and dumped it in front of Richard and said, you know, have you got a job? I'll do anything. I'll clean the floors. I'll lick your toilets clean. Please, I'm working with this. And he said, well, we might have a little job coming up. We'll give you a chance. You know, I see that you're enthusiastic. So see how you go. And it turned out the little job was Lord of the Rings at the early stages. And so the first job they chucked me in was being a miniatures person, working in the miniatures department. Never done it before. Gave it a go. And turned out the first miniature I worked on was for the Balrog sequence with the Mines of Moria. So some of those little bricks that are printed into the place, I did those little bricks. And then Richard said, we need to build hundreds of suits of armour for this film. Have you ever built suits of armour? I said, no, give it a go though. So what the hell? So we started building hundreds of suits of armour for Urukai, Elves, Rohan, Gondorian, Prologue Elves, Prologue Gondorian. All these armies, there was hundreds and hundreds of suits needed to be built. And it was a case of riveting, getting your hands cut with a craft knife, slicing your hands up on silver foil, all these things. And you know, I go home with words at the end of the day, but I was determined to keep working through it, and ended up, what you see in the film, all these 100 suits of armour, I can now say that I helped work on all of those suits. And Richard saw that I was still enthusiastic to do more stuff, so he said, okay, why don't we try some of the hero costumes? So I got to work on some of the leather work for Aragorn, for Bilbo, for Frodo, the Hobbits. Work on King Theoden's suit, his armour, with the bronze and the horse and all that sort of stuff. I got to help with that. And from that, the film started winding up, and I still wanted to work at Weta, and they said they were getting into merchandising. They asked, can you sculpt? And I said, give it a go. And so I sculpted more stuff for merchandising. I got merchandising pieces stuck out there, and ended up winning an award for Best Bust of the Year for a little Rolf bust that I did for the Muppets, and that won an award over in New York. So that was kind of buzzed with that, kind of freaky. And then I slowly progressed into the design department. I worked on Jane and the Dragon, that was Weta's first television program, and then worked on the What-What's, creating the title creatures for the What-What's, and then worked on Narnia, Black Sheep, worked on losing track of all the things I worked on then. So many little projects that I can hardly name them. I mean, to give you an idea of what my job entails every year, what you see on the screen, say for something like TinTin, you go, okay, that guy must have just worked on that solely. But in real fact, I can work on to about 30 or 40 projects in a year. And most of those projects will never see the light of day. That's one of the sad things, is that we get lots of scripts coming to us with directors with great visions, and we've got great ideas, and we draw for those ideas, but there's no guarantee that's going to make it to the big screen. And so all the artwork that you do sometimes will never be seen by the public, because the studios want to hold on to those ideas, because there might be some really good ideas in those things that you've drawn, and they don't want the competition to get those ideas because they might get the winning film. And so that's one of the downsides of this job, is that you do draw a lot, and quite a bit of time people will never see those drawings. Not to put a downer on it just yet, but, you know. So now we're getting on to this up here, TinTin, which, if I know how to operate this thing correctly. So, right, this stage yet. It's kind of scary when a person that works in the digital industry doesn't know how to run his own laptop. Right? So, this film, TinTin, came along. As I said before, Raiders of the Lost Ark was my favourite film, and Richard went into the room, came into the design room one day and said, we've got a film coming up, Steven Spielberg wants to do a version of TinTin. Who would like to lead the conceptual design of the stage? And as it turned out, one of my earliest memories as well as movies was TinTin. At the age of 3, I can still remember seeing TinTin books on a bookshelf, and reading TinTin in Tibet at the age of 3, or looking at the pictures of it. It's not reading, it wasn't that clear. But, so I've been a huge TinTin fan all my life, and to hear that Steven Spielberg, my favourite director, was directing TinTin, my favourite book, which probably got me into art as well, I couldn't hold back. I wanted to do it, but I didn't have enough guts. And Richard went away and he didn't know who was going to lead the project. And a few days later, he called me up and said, Chris, why the hell didn't you stand up and say something? I could see you itching on the seat. It looked like you want to go to the toilet or something. I said, I didn't know if I could do it. He said, look where you started. You came in here, you had no experience, and now you're in the design room and working in, Weta Workshop of all places. And it's won Academy Award, so give it a go. So, okay, give it a go. And as a result, TinTin came up, and I was the lead conceptual designer for this film, which is quite nice. So at least. Before I actually get into the whole talk, that was my whole life story. Sorry to bore you with it.
How many years have passed since you first joined?
I've now been at Weta for 14 years, coming up October. Yeah, I'm one for long term. Yeah. You can tell by the rings over my eyes sometimes. So I'll explain a few things about this talk before I get started. Now, I haven't done a design course at all in my life. I did a small foundation course, and they said, okay, this was back when there was no proper film industry that I liked, as I said before. They said you can be an illustrator, or you can work in advertising, or you can illustrate books, and I didn't want to do any of those. And that course lasted for about 6 months. And that's as much as I've had as a design course, and I didn't really take any of it in. In fact, for the main project to get me into the next stage, I did a huge poster of Terminator 2, and that didn't go down too well. So what you're going to hear from me today, all these theories that I'll be talking about, it's all the things that I've picked up over time while working at Weta Workshop, and even going back as far as drawing cartoon portraits in shopping malls. And it's also from watching crap load of films. I'm a film addict, I love films, good and bad. And the thing I've noticed is that people go to the movies and they say the film's good, and they go, sweet, that was a good film, let's go see it, it was great, and they walk away. They see a bad film, that was a terrible film, they walk away. They never actually study why the film made them feel good or why the film made them feel bad. There's very little kind of reasons all the way through a film that give you a gut instinct why you like something, why you don't like something. And not enough people look at those little factors. And so I'm saying to you right now, watch Adam Sandler comedies, okay? As horrible as they might be, things like Jack and Jill, you'll find sometimes they actually pay off because you'll see something that you don't like and then you'll study it and go, this is why I don't like it, and you'll remember it for yourself. And you'll take it away and say, okay, I'll remember never to do that. I'll remember never to design a main character dressed up as a woman. Things like that, okay? So yeah, that's pretty much some of the stuff that you're going to hear today that I'll be talking about, some of my experiences through the workforce. Also, you'll notice every time that I show you TinTin pictures, there's a logo on it saying the art of the Adventures of TinTin, like here. I'm sorry, I feel like a bit of an infomercial person, but part of the deal is that the only way that I can really show you the images from TinTin is if I link it in with the book that I wrote as well. It makes me feel like, I feel like an infomercial person, and that I should talk about Ginsu knives next. But that's part of the deal, that's a contract that I've had to sign with the company that released the film. You'll find that so often that the companies, or every single company that approaches you for a film, will get you to sign one of these contracts where you can't show your artwork out to the public just yet. And it's for reasons like I was explaining before, where they want to keep their ideas secret as much as they can. Because if one of the competition gets that idea and chucks it up before them, then these people are seen as the followers and not the leaders, if that makes sense. And also, another thing is that there's an app that goes with this as well. I'll show that a bit later with this iPad. And this actually is a good way of illustrating whereabouts concept art is going in the future. It's a whole new tool which is coming about. Notice I've segued that in. It's an interesting tool which is coming up, and it's probably going to affect the film industry quite a bit. There is lots of multimedia platforms out there, as we've heard in some of the previous talks here, that are emerging that are competing with movie industry, and it doesn't have to take over the movie industry totally. We can actually work with it hand in hand, and concept artists can help in that handover. So if you want to become a concept artist, that's actually a really good move, because it's going to be lots of work for us in the future, guaranteed. Now, I'll also be talking about, well, this whole thing of concept art and production design. I could go on all day, all week, talking about this stuff. I don't know where I have to finish, because I love this stuff, and there are a hell of a lot of theories about all the stuff that I do. It isn't just a case of drawing a smiley face in a person, or happy blue sky and clouds. There's a lot of theories. So I might talk a bit less than the time allocated. I might talk a bit more, but I'll try to fit some time in there for questions as well. If you guys do have an urgent question you want to ask about something up on the screen or something I talk about, just give me a shout out and I'll try my best to answer it. Yeah. All depending on confidentiality agreements that I've signed. Okay. So, right, where do I start? I suppose the best way to start really is to tell you what a concept designer is. Our job is basically to visualise the client's imagination, whether it's a director, a producer, a script writer. They come to us and they haven't got the drawing skills or the artistic abilities to put that image out to sell to the world. So we have to be their imagination. This can be done with artwork, as what I specialise in is drawing most of the time, but it can also be done with sculpture, it can be done with model making, traditional model making of models. You can do 3D models on computers. You could even use cardboard cutouts and Play-Doh if you want to, whatever you want. The main point of concept design is to try and get an image or an idea across to whoever's looking at it. And it has to be an instant feeling. It's first impressions count. Because imagine a person coming in totally fresh and they sit down and they see your drawing, they have to get a gut instinct reaction from that drawing or from that sculpture. They have to feel something from it. Otherwise it's just background noise. They won't pay attention to it. There has to be some sort of power behind that image. And the cool thing about this, the job as well, is that you can actually inspire the director's imagination as well. There were many times during TinTin where basically Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson said, okay, we need something to happen in the scene. Okay, you guys come up with a bunch of ideas. What can you come up with? And they just leave it to us to come up with crazy ideas. They say, okay, here's the limitations, here's the environment, There's the characters you need to use. Come up with something. What can you come up with? And so we'd spend the whole week coming up with bizarre and crazy ideas that some of them did actually make it to the final thing in the film. And for the designers that created those moments, there's no bigger buzz. Because although you see the director's name on it saying Steven Spielberg, we know straight away, that was us. It's a good buzz. It's a really good feeling. And also an idea from just one picture of yours can inspire a whole section of a film. There's an example, hopefully I'll show you later on, with one guy, Frank Victoria, one of the designers there, and he did one drawing that he'd spent about a day on, and it inspired a whole big chase sequence that was in TinTin. The whole sequence with the bike and going through the city and things falling down and rappelling down the line. That was all inspired by one artwork at the very start, and it shows you just the power that your drawings can have. So now we're getting on to almost the creative part of it. Unfortunately, this was probably the picture that you saw at the start. It's the boring part. This is when the client comes up to you and they say, okay, I want to have you guys design for us. What can you do for us? What you need to do straight away is get as much information from that client as possible. You have to remember the person that's approaching you has probably been with the project and heart and soul for at least a week. I'd say probably more, but even at a week, they know a hell of a lot more than you do. And so you need to catch up as much as you can and get as much information out of the person as possible, so that you don't end up going down the wrong track and wasting a lot of their time and a lot of their money. So these are some of the questions that you ask. There's the obvious one: what is the basic story? Where does it take place? What are some of the environments there? When does it take place? TinTin was taking place in a certain period of time. It was in a very strange period of time where it was like the Second World War never existed. There were no Nazi propaganda around the place, even though in many ways it was taking place sometime just before the World War II kicked in. Who are the main characters? That's a very, very important part that we'll look at in a moment, how to design those characters. Is there a particular look the client likes? For TinTin, Stephen and Peter said we have to stick to the feeling of the books. Not so much in the graphic style where everything's flat, but things like the colour elements, the silhouettes of the characters, the way that the characters look, had to feel like it was TinTin but had just been brought to life. What were the inspirations for the story? Well, TinTin was a bunch of books, understandably. How will it be filmed? Is it going to be a live action film? Is it going to be a CG film? Is it stop motion? Is it ordinary 2D animation? All of these things can dictate your design styles and also dictate the budgets and how crazy your ideas can be. Now, what market is this aimed at? This is quite an important one as well. With TinTin, it was always going to be aimed at sort of like the PG-13 market, steering more towards the kids. So many people actually saw it when we worked on the film as a younger version of Indiana Jones. It was that same sort of adventure type style that we wanted. But there are films out there which, if you look at them from a distance, they are the same story. A good example is Finding Nemo and Taken. Don't even think about it, but Finding Nemo is about a guy who loses his kid and it's taken away and he doesn't know where it's gone and he has to go get it back. Taken is about a guy who loses his kid, doesn't know where that kid has gone, and he has to bring them back. But they're two totally different films, as you might have guessed. So that's a very important one. What is the budget for a film? Understandably, that can dictate how big your ideas get. How much of the budget is actually allocated to the concept design phase? That's another big one as well. Because you'll find with some of the small projects that come along, they'll try to get as much out of you as possible for the least amount of money. It's a tradition. It goes on for years and years. And it's totally understandable. I want to make films myself one day and I'll be doing the same thing. Because you want to get the biggest bang out of your buck. But sometimes you have to say, okay, I'm sorry, I can't draw the Taj Mahal in every detail for your little $50,000 film. It's just not possible. And of course, what are the deadlines? The other major one, which does come up quite a bit. These are other questions that have to be asked. I've quickly looked through them. What characters need to be designed, said that before. Describe each of the characters. That's very important because you'll be selling those characters to the movie studios through your pictures. Quite a bit of the time, the movie studios will quickly skim over the words, but if they see artwork in front of them, they can tell straight away that's what the character is. I know who that person is. Does your client have any actor suggestions that match the vision of their character's personality? There's this thing that I feel real sorry for actors is that they always get typecast into roles. There's certain actors that can only play bad guys, unfortunately, or certain actors that only can play the comedy relief. This one is, we're basically using that unfortunate kind of thing that happens in the world to our advantage. And what you do is actually pick out the characters, and when you ask this question, that director is using those kind of characteristics from certain actors and saying, that's the kind of person I want it to be. Say if I wanted an eccentric doctor, and you say, okay, well, who's going to play that eccentric doctor? If you said it was Jeff Goldblum, that'd be totally different from someone like Christopher Walken. It's a different sort of style. Jeff Goldblum uses his hands and he does this, and it's all, oh my god. Whereas you've got Christopher Walken, he's kind of reserved and he's quite freaky, he's quite off kilter. Just saying who they picture as that person would be incredibly useful. But don't ever draw the actor in that picture, because they can come back and bite you in the arse later on. Because I love actors, I love what they do. Their agents can be sort of cutthroat sometimes, and if they see an actor's face in a concept picture, they'll instantly ask for more money. Because they say, this film can't be made without this actor, because look, you've drawn him. So you have to capture the spirit of that actor. That's why it's a good idea with this one, you actually ask for a collection of actors. You know, not just one actor, but what kind of personality. You know, Christopher Walken, Jeff Goldblum, Christopher Lloyd. If you had a combination of those, you pick out certain elements from those three people and try to make someone who's like that. What environments need to be designed? That's self-explanatory. Are there any actual locations picked out for the shoot? Sometimes you'll be designing into places that already exist. Maybe you have to stick a huge building into some mountainscape, stuff like that. If there are any creatures to be designed, how will they be done? That's another big one regarding budget and how crazy your ideas can be. TinTin was going to be a live action film at the start with prosthetics. And so we had to design things onto actors and do prosthetic noses to start off with TinTin, Snowy being the only computer-generated character in the whole film. But then they decided, no, this is crazy, let's just make everyone computer-generated, because then we can get really stylistic and go quite caricatured with characters. And that changed the budget straight away, doing it that way, and also changed our design sense.
Did it change it up or down?
Changed it up. Yeah, there's a lot more work that has to go into designing for a computer-generated film that you never even think about. Best way of describing it is that, say if I had to go for a film and they said, okay, we need a cup, we need an iPad, and we need this projector for this live-action film. But sweet, you go to a place, you rent a projector, rent an iPad, someone might have one, and you get a cup, stick it on the desk. For a computer-generated film, you have to design this projector, you have to design this iPad, you have to design that. Then you've got people that go off on CG, and they have to build this projector, they have to build that, they have to build that. Then you get the texture people that come in, they have to texture this, texture that, texture that. Then the lighters come in, they have to light everything, so to make sure the light is bouncing off that, it's bouncing off the cup, it's bouncing off the iPad. All these factors. So yeah, you never even realise that with some of those films, or some of those shots in TinTin, where you just in for a split second, there were hundreds of people working on that to do stuff like putting dirt in the cobblestones. And you don't even think of it, but that dirt was actually designed as well. You know, is there too much dirt there? Or maybe there's not enough dirt. There could be that's quite a bit of dirt over there. And everyone's contemplating that all the time. And you only see it for a split second.
How long did it take you guys to work on the whole markets sequence? Because
That
there's
was-
so much stuff.
That was a long, long time. There was a lot of reference that we had to get for that, because every single one of the books that Hergé wrote for TinTin, he researched everything to the utmost. You know, there was things like the seaplane was a very specific seaplane that he designed. He wanted to change a few things. So we had to take that much time as well to research everything. And for the marketplace, we actually had a props department at Weta Digital that went out and they bought a whole bunch of props and took photographs of all the props in full circuit. So you'd see them all littered throughout the place. So there was a room filled with all different props. Even though it was a CG film, we had a props department with lots of physical props. And so that, on top of that, we had characters as well everywhere. So something like that, all spread out over the whole film, just about. In fact, there's no kind of one section which was dedicated to one period of time. Everything was being worked on all at the same time. So now we're getting into the more interesting part. We're going to talk about characters. As I said before, first impressions count. They're very, very important to pitching to a movie studio. There's certain things that, I hate to say that, we use cliches in our business. We use cliches a hell of a lot. because that's the easiest way of getting ideas across to people. I mean, a good example is this one guy here. Is this guy a good guy or a bad guy? You know,
Looks pretty bad.
he's bad? Yeah, now, have to study why is he a bad guy?
He isn't shaved.
Yep, exactly. Yep. There's a whole collection of these things. If I go step through step, I'll just kind of show you some of these things that pop out. I mean, you've got, in summary, to sum this up, this guy's creepy. You know, if this guy was standing across the street, he's creepy. You know, why the hell is he creepy? One thing, he's wearing a black suit. There's this black suit out there. It's almost like an old-fashioned undertaker, which gives you the impression that he deals with death. And most people like life over death. So straight away you go, okay, this guy deals with death. I don't like messing with this guy. He's not very nice. Then you've got the fact that he's hunched over, like he's almost sneaking around. Why do people sneak? It's because they're trying to hide something. Maybe he's trying to hide the plan that he's just done somewhere else and he doesn't want anyone to find out. So there's another factor to make him a bad guy. He's wringing his hands like this. Now, why do you wring your hands? Because you're thinking about that plan you've just made. You go, it's, he's not exactly handsome. I mean, if you had this guy, he's got a bit of a pock-marked face as well. If they had a choice of the average heroine kind of comes up to this guy or Brad Pitt to ride off into the sunset with, who's she going to choose? It's not going to be this guy. It's guaranteed. She'll come, Brad, okay, Brad, go with him. He's creepy. I don't want to deal with this guy. He's unshaven, as you pointed out. That usually makes you think of, you know, it could be a case where he was rushing out in the morning, didn't have time to shave, rushed out. But most people associate unshaven people with they don't care about their general hygiene. They're unclean, they're dirty, which means that you want to stay away from this guy because he's undirty. You know, he's not doing a Don Johnson thing trying to keep unshaven, you know, to be trendy. He's doing it because he's dirty, and that's the first impression that hits you when you see him. He's dark around the eyes, which gives you the impression that he's it's almost skull-like. I've got this unfortunate face that when the light hits me in a certain way, I look like a skull and I freak people out. It's because you can see my lines. When I do, don't know if I can do it with this slide, but you see how certain places you can suddenly see my eyes like that. So if I smile, suddenly I turn into a skull with skin. And that freaks people out. It's not a comfortable image. And so you play on that. People associate skulls with death again. And so you stick that into the image. The shifty expression on his face. You know, he's looking around trying to make sure no one's seeing what he's up to. Again, what is he trying to hide? Remember the Simpsons episode, I don't know if you're fans of Simpsons, but remember that Simpsons episode when Homer talked about the shifty-eyed dog. He said, the shifty-eyed dog, he's planning something, you don't trust him. At the very end to show the dog going. And that's because it's a cliche, but we use it in the concept art. Cliches are great. And it's all of these combinations, all of these things all tied together to make you think that this guy is a bad guy. It's not just one thing, it's a whole set of things all together. He could be wringing his hands because he's just cold. If he was wearing a puffer jacket and a beanie, you'd say, okay, he's cold. He's not evil, he's just cold. But it's because it's all of these things all tied together, you instantly think this guy is a bad guy. This character, Saprin, he was the bad guy in Tintin, and we used all of these techniques for that film. Basically, Stephen, the character in the book is nothing like the one that's in the film. The character is he's actually a good guy in the books. In the film, Stephen wanted a champagne villain, so we had to figure out ways of making this guy a champagne villain. So we thought, slicked back hair with slightly kind of a hook, makes him look slightly crazy with their hairstyle. The beard, the glasses, they're all very carefully thought out. In fact, we went through so many different stages of trying to figure out what the beard, what the hairstyle would look like. For instance, this one, when you see it, it looks like Hitler. So you can't link it, that's just being a bit too obvious. This one makes him look like Lenin. It's amazing how facial hair and ordinary hair can change a character straight away. Even the fact that, you know, if he has no moustache gives him a totally different expression than if he has a twirling moustache or if he's got a handlebar. All of these things count in the end. So then you get other characters like this guy. This guy, we didn't know if he was a good guy or a bad guy at the start. The pose that we did here was to give him a slightly looking off to the side. You don't know if he's good or if he's bad. All of these poses and drawings that we did were all designed to get an emotion out of whoever looks at it straight off. This guy was the pickpocket. He's a bit full of himself. He's quite high to do, he's quite well cut, he's, very sure of himself. He's kind of got that look that he might be doing something naughty and he doesn't want to get caught. He's like a little boy. And then you get on to ones like Tintin. Tintin was the hardest character to do for the film, because without realising it, there's certain characteristics that are in the book that make him look like an old man if you turn him into live action. The best way of showing it is this image here. This was a sculpt that we did, trying to do a three-dimensional version of Tintin from the books. Without even realising it, as soon as you try to put that quiff on top of the head, you give him a long forehead, he looks old because he looks like he's got a receding hairline. And he's always shown in the books as being the boy reporter. So the last thing you want is a boy reporter with a receding hairline. It doesn't work. We also had things like the mouth. How do you make that mouth shape? That's always in the books. In the books, he's constantly going, he's got this look in his face. If you had that in the film, he's just going, he looked like an idiot. He'd be running around looking like an absolute doofus for most of the film. So we had to figure out how do you get some of those expressions onto his face in a 3D manner and still make him a nice character to look at, but have the fans of Tintin say, okay, I can accept that's Tintin. So what we ended up with, that's jumping forward a bit, what you see in the final film is a result of many, 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 many man-hours trying to get the character which is least offensive to everyone. It's, there were about, we did many, tens of versions of Tintin. I'd say probably going into about 60 different versions of Tintin at the Weta workshop. At Weta Digital, they kept working on it all the way through the project, and the project went for about 6 years making in total, because he's the main character. You have to empathise with this character.
Sorry.
Yeah.
How did you shoot the eye color?
Sorry?
The color of the eyes?
Oh, the colour of the eyes?
Supposed to be dots on the...
Yeah, that's another tricky one. Yeah, how do you choose the colour of the eyes? In the film, do you make them blue-eyed? Do you make them dark-eyed? It all came down to what Stephen wanted in the end. We gave him a whole range of options, but the problem is when you give a person dark pupils, you start giving them, they feel like they haven't got a soul. Quint in Jaws used the line, the shark has got dead doll's eyes. That's what people with dark eyes quite a bit of time had, that problem. There's David Mitchell, a very well-known, hopefully well-known, you guys know him. He's a comedian in England that does the Mitchell web show. And you look at his eyes, and he hasn't got any colour in his eyes. He's got pure black eyes. And he's the scariest damn guy to look at. I know he's a comedian, but if he looked angry at you and he had those eyes, you'd freak out. You go, geez, I don't like this guy. So yeah, it's one of those design questions that just gets tossed around all the time. So all these things to do with characters also plays a part in environments as well. What emotion can you get from an environment? Here's another blatant example. This is a very quick, rough sketch. Okay, you had to go to grandmother's house. Which path would you go down? Would you go down that path, or would you go down that path? It's pretty obvious. You're going down a street, dark night. Which path do you go down? Do you go down the well-lit one, or do you go down the one which is shady and there's a guy smoking in the corner? You go down the well-lit one. It's quite obvious. There's all sorts of things in this image as well. There's things like over here, we've actually got a bit of life. There's flowers and stuff like that. Over there, everything's died. The path over here is nice and clear. You can see it's going in a straight line. Over here, it's meandering all over the place. There's things falling over. You'd have to step over things. If you were running away from a wolf, you'd probably trip over something. It's all those kind of factors that you're trying to put into your environment pieces as well to kind of elicit an emotion of some sorts. Here's a good example of what you can do with just lighting, the same kind of thing. Here's an office worker, okay? He's an office worker. You look at it, he's just an average Joe Bloggs working in an office. But if you change the lighting and the setup, here's a guy who's pressed for work. He's surrounded by the filing cabinets. The filing cabinets look like they're almost encroaching on him. He's stressed out because he's working late at night, the light is turned on. In the background, the Venetian blinds make him look like he's in a jail. It's all these tiny little things that you're putting into your images to try and invoke a feeling of some sort. Then you get this one. Here's a guy who's, things are going out of control. He's getting smaller and smaller in the world. The world seems to be getting larger around him. Everything is focusing down on him. It's like all the pressures are pushing down on him. And again, he feels like he's being put into a cell, a jail of some sort. But then you get the other alternative. Terry Gilliam loves this angle. When he's showing a person that's taking over, or a person in authority, he puts them up in a high pedestal looking up. And so you get shots like this for films involving kids talking to teachers. There's Matilda. There's a shot of, the grumpy teacher in Matilda. and all the shots are looking up at her, and she's looming over the top. So this guy could be a real estate person, or a person trying to make a big deal, or maybe the person who's going to give you a loan at the bank. In fact, that Venetian blind at the side now makes him look like he's the jailer. He's not the guy inside the prison. And then you get ones like this. Suddenly the focus is on the phone. The focus is no longer on that person in the background. The phone is important. That means there's going to be an important phone call coming through soon. You'll see this in films like Matrix. When the phone goes off, you'll suddenly see Neo go, and he holds the phone at a distance. The phone is in focus straight away. The phone is the important part. You'll see it in so many films in the past that have used it part when the phone is going to go off. The best example is Top Secret. It's a comedy film that was done back in 1980. And they have this huge phone that's at the front. You think, oh, the phone call's going to come. When the guy walks up, you realise it is literally a huge phone. It's up in front. That film is a great one to watch actually for inspiration for things to do with concept art, because it plays on all the visual cliches that will come to you. You know, we know in films. We've got used to these cliches so often. For this one example, this was an idea for the antique seller in the Marlinspike for TinTin. Mist is a good thing to make someplace look creepy. Where the hell is this mist coming from? Doesn't matter. I mean, movies have fantasy all the way through it. We deal in fantasy. Even the most realistic films, documentary films, when you start looking at lighting setups and stuff like that, they just can't work. I mean, there's scenes in Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, not saying that's a realistic film, but where on earth did they get enough water in that bucket to go chasing after the mine shafts? There was this big bucket, they pushed it over, and this water went chasing after them. The bucket was about the size of maybe about 3/4 of this room. The water that came out of it was spraying out of that mountainside for about 5 minutes. That's a very, 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 very never-ending bucket of water. But when you're watching the film, go, hey, don't care, eat more popcorn. You know, we deal with fantasy all the time. So there is a certain level of realism that you have to hit when you're being a designer, but you can also push the boundaries quite a bit. This is another way of expressing the mood. This place was going to be the dock. It was one of the designs that we did for the dock. What kind of feeling do we want this dock to have? And we wanted sort of like a slightly oppressive, slightly mystical feeling. There was going to be a whole different storyline I can't even tell you about in the film that was going to be slightly mystical and slightly supernatural. And so we wanted the supernatural feeling, and you do that with things like the colour of the sky is purple. Purple you associate with slightly mystical things. You know, if you see a wizard dressed in purple, it's slightly more mystical than a wizard dressed in grey. Sorry, Gandalf. You know. Captain Haddock's cabin. Again, this is another real quick sketch we did. This shows the extent of how crazy this guy has gone over time. You can imagine Captain Haddock when he first started, he wasn't always drunk. He was actually probably a really good captain when he started. But we're using the environment to show how far he's actually gone down the track of becoming an alcoholic. So he's done things like he's stuck labels from his whiskey bottles on the walls at the back as decoration, almost like trophies. Like the old World War II, stuck a little plane thing off the side of the plane, so he shot it down. He's done that with whiskey bottles. And he's also decorated his whole area with bottles. He's finding decorative ways to do it. There was this big argument at the start in the book. It's a very plain room, and it just looks very plain. And one of the guys was saying, you know, we should stick to the book totally because, you know, it's a very plain room. But then you have to decide, this captain is being held against his against his will in his own ship. Why would he stay there? There's no reason for him to stay there. He'd go crazy. If he was drunk, he'd go crazy and bash down walls. So they tried to give him as many comforts to keep him placated. So lots of booze, keep him comfortable. That figurehead that's sitting above him, that can be his female, you know, support, his female relative or whatever. He can look at that as a female person. It's all to keep Captain Haddock contained. So this changed quite a bit from the book, but there was a reason for it, because we wanted to show who that character was. Even the ship itself, the Caribou Jeanne that he controlled or was supposed to be captain of, this ship is running, it's just falling apart all around him. And that again mirrors Captain Haddock's attitude of himself. He used to be a good captain, this ship was in good state before. But now you look at it, it's twisted, the corridor is slightly twisted, so he's slightly askew. There's chains hanging all over the place, it's messy, there's water running up. Maybe Captain Haddock has a tough time holding his bladder. You know, it's little things like that that instantly tell you something about a character that most filmmakers or film watchers don't realise they've seen this stuff, but it is getting into their impression straight off. Same with TinTin. adventures that he's been on around the world. This was used by Stephen. Stephen actually saw this picture and he said, oh, this would be great. We can actually have an opening scene where we show who TinTin is by going over some of his past adventures. It seems like a very obvious thing to do, but you have to get that idea across the audience in less than 30 seconds because you don't want to spend too much time doing exposition. As you can see, that being a concept artist is all about telling stories all the way through. Each of these things, or each of those places, tell a story about who that character lives in that department. Which brings us on to research, as we were saying before. Got the market. This was the actual market that Hergé used as inspiration for his books. You can try to draw something off the top of your head and you say, oh, that looks quite good. Guaranteed it's not going to be right because you may have a really fertile imagination, but always draw using reference. Always go out to see reference of any sort, whether it's environments, whether it's people. I mean, I'm terrible at anatomy. I am absolutely useless. I give people too many knees or knees going in strange angles and elbows in strange points. So I actually get some of my fellow designers to pose for me in the pose I want. I take a photo of them and use that as inspiration. Even people like Norman Rockwell, he's a well-known American artist. He used himself, dressed in an overcoat, running, so that he get the right pose of what he wanted and took a photo of himself. So don't be ashamed of using reference. It is. When I first started, I saw all these guys doing stuff off the top of their head and I thought, that's what I have to do. And I ended up making sausage people for most of my designs and they looked terrible. But then Richard took me aside and said, use reference, it's going to help a hell of a lot. And it did. So please, don't be embarrassed to use reference of any sort. I mean, as you see with this market, if you tried to imagine what an antiques market would look like, you'd think, oh, there's a few chairs, a few carpets, all that sort of stuff. This place had a deer head, there was a chandelier at the back, there was some Wham albums for sale over there, we didn't use that in the film, understandably. There was everything imaginable was chucked into this flea market, stuff that we couldn't even imagine in the wildest dreams. But because I actually had the chance to go there and take photographs of these things, we knew, okay, there is stuff like antique African sculptures there, we'll chuck some of those in there. There is things like antique clocks, there's plates, all that sort of stuff. It all helps to fill out a scene and fill out an environment. Belgian streets was another one. I drew this picture before I had a chance to go to Belgium, and I was using reference from the internet. And that's okay to a level. The internet's a very nice library to have, but you do make mistakes with it, even if it is a nice library. This felt too much like a French town or some other European town. It didn't feel Belgian. This was done very early stage. I'm still learning the ropes now, but this was when I was really learning the ropes. And it's only when I actually visited the place that there's little details about Belgium which make it feel like Belgium. One thing which I saw was these little kind of holes by the sides of doors. And I asked one of the guides there, what are these little holes that you see built into the buildings? They said, oh, well, we did have a problem with dogs for a while, and we needed to scrape the poo of our shoes. So these holes have little metal plates to scrape the dog poo off their shoes. And it was a very, very Belgian thing. There's quite a few people that say, oh no, those aren't poo things, that's for scraping off mud and scraping off snow. But how often does Belgium get snow, and how muddy does Belgium get? Or Brussels get, I should say. They're not going to build something into a building just for the occasional snowstorm or the occasional muddy moment. So dogs were apparently a real big problem. And so into the final film, we actually had things like dog scrapers. Unfortunately, you can't see them. Well, you can actually. Just next to the skip, just here, you see that little dent? Even though it looks minuscule on the thing, that is a dog scraper. And it's only because of things like that that the guys in the 3D department said, okay, let's chuck that in there. And now we've had so many people phoning up from Belgium saying, oh man, it was like it was in Brussels, it was incredible, but it's not Brussels. How did you do that? And it's because we're paying attention to all those little details. It all makes a difference. Marlin Spike is another example. We had to make it look more run down than it is in the books. Again, that was all reference. This is the original place that Hergé used as reference for Marlin Spike. As you can see, he made a difference already. He actually chopped off the ends because he said it looked too grand. It didn't look like Captain Haddock could actually own this place. So he chopped off the end of the buildings and kept to that centre part. And what you see there isn't the sign of a crazy person or a serial killer. This is the level of research that we had to go. This is the kind of stuff that you needed to do for a CG film. It's like I was saying before, how complicated it gets with a CG film, how much you have to design. For this, we had to know what kind of texture was around Marlin Spike. and what size was the texture as well. So I'd see, when I was on location, I'd see tourists over there taking photos, nice long shots, that's great, let's keep it, walk away. Then they'd look over at me and I was going, take a shot of that. Oh, there's a nice brick, take a shot of that. And I was looking, and people looked at me like I was a serial killer. You know. Didn't help that I had a skull for a face anyway, but, you know. But all of this stuff pays off. And the reason why I'm taking a photo of my shoe is because I've got a size 10.5 shoe. And I didn't want to have to carry around a ruler all day and chuck it down next to something and take a photo. I had to do something quick. So stick my shoe in there, take a photo, go back to Guise, say, I've got a size 10.5 shoe. They do that. All of this all helps with the concept art stage and also helps further down the line as well. All these little details. That's the end of that slideshow for the moment. But there are so many other things I can actually talk about which I haven't got artwork for because it was actually a totally different subject to what you see in. Hang on, I'm just going to try to go back to the thing, if I guess this one. Yep, it's me again. Hopefully. Yeah, there's certain films out there like Lord of the Rings and stuff where there's fantasy elements that, of course, you can't get reference for. You know, like Balrogs and stuff like that, but everything again has a touch of realism. I'll give you a quick example. Big creatures have small eyes. That shows their size. The only chance that some creature which is big has got a big eye is if it's living down the bottom of the sea somewhere like a giant squid. But if you look at elephants, they have small eyes. Blue whales, they have small eyes. And so creatures like the Balrog has small eyes. That gives them scale straight away. The cave troll had small eyes. If you gave them big, goofy eyes, it would look wrong. People would say, that doesn't look realistic. And they couldn't figure out why. They'd say, maybe the eyes are a bit too big, but they couldn't figure out what is the reason behind it. It's because we have grown up seeing animals like elephants and rhinos and whales, and they all have small eyes. And all the muscle structure on the creatures like that is all real as well. It's all carefully thought out. As I said before, I am terrible with anatomy, but there's people like, there's a fantastic sculptor we have at a workshop called Jamie Warwick, who knows anatomy inside out for every type of creature. He knows how muscle structure goes. He knows the name of bones and everything. And he's put a lot of thought into how these creatures would be put out. Him, along with the team, would figure out how the Balrog would be able to fly or bounce up with those pathetic wings. How would the Velbeaks be able to move? It's all very important. There are elements of fantasy, as I said before, that we can go into, but you need to have some sort of realism to capture the audience. What else can I talk about? The future of concept design. Where is it going? I know quite a few guys that approach me want you to get into business and say, okay, I suppose you have to have a lot of really expensive tools to do your thing. Totally rubbish. You don't have to have expensive Photoshop stuff or expensive top range Macs or PCs or anything like that. You can do stuff, if you've got a really good idea, and you can put that message across really clearly to a person, you can do it with a pencil or for a red crayon. There's one example of a film I can't mention the name of, but the director, he wanted to see a range of weapons, handheld weapons. They were like blades, but not like the usual kind of blades that you see. You know, he had to have someone walking around with this blade and just use it like it was a second weapon, or a second hand, I should say. And so I thought, oh, what if you had something which is tied around there, and it's like a plate at the top, and you had a big spark coming out. It was linked in there. And I couldn't quite draw it in time, so I went off and I cut up a folder from the back of a book, cut it all up, stuck it together with sellotape, spray painted it black, went through and showed the guy and said, what do you think of that? And he said, yeah, that's it, sweet, done. And so straight away that director was happy, and that was with a cardboard cutout. You know, it doesn't have to be expensive tools. If you have a computer, it's very useful. I won't deny that. Things like Photoshop would make my job a lot easier, because if some director says, I don't like this particular aspect of this thing, you can change that tiny aspect without having to draw the whole thing again. It makes things a lot easier. But instead of using Photoshop, there are other programs that you can actually use out there. I've got a list of some of them. GIMP is a good one. That's just good for, it's good for, it does most of the Photoshop things. There's some things it has a problem with, like printing and stuff like that, but have a look at it anyway. If you can't afford Photoshop, it's a good starting point. If you're interested in things like 3D animation, stuff like that for characters, try going to things like Blender, Animator, K3D, and Soft Image, XSI, and Mod Tool. All of these things are things that you can actually find for free on the internet. Even type in free 3D modeling program. You know, type that in and you'll get lots of things. And if it gets your ideas across, your concept designs in a 3D form across to the director, great, who cares that it's free? In fact, the example that I even used on TinTin was SketchUp. Google SketchUp is an incredibly useful tool and it's totally free. I mean, this is where I designed it. I mean, I'm plugging the app now, so sorry about this. But we had the, let's see if this is actually going to come up. Yeah, can you guys see that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was the app I had to design as well. And part of it was we wanted to have a totally interaction. We wanted to use as many aspects of the iPad's functionality as we could. There's very cool things that iPads can do that up to a certain point have only been used for gimmicky things. We wanted to have it so that there was actually a reason behind some of the gimmicks. And so we tried this. This environment here was done using SketchUp. So you can actually look all around Tintin's apartment and see things. And every so often you see a star pops up, you can click on that, some information comes up about it.
And you could create all those pictures and drawings and everything in SketchUp?
This is all in SketchUp, yeah. So all of this stuff, we made the basic models, and I built this model myself, and it's just using the basic models, you figure out the lay of the land. It's usually good to start from a painting to start with, so you've got some sort of inspiration. And then you build the model around that picture. And you actually use the textures from the painting and stick it onto the various parts of Google SketchUp. And so what you end up with is this. It's basically a 3D environment. And this could actually be the way that films are going to be designed in the future as well. Things like this. This isn't actually.
How long would it take to create
this?
that?
Well, since I was learning the ropes at the time, it actually took about a couple of weeks trying to figure it all out. But even that is actually quite good. And the cool thing about it is that the people that we worked with on the app made it so that you can actually move this iPad around. So you can pretend that you're standing on the side of Tintin's apartment. I mean, it's hard to do it with a projector, but okay.
Wow.
So you imagine giving this to a director and saying, here's an environment that we thought could be kind of cool. Showing them that. And this was done on a free program. This is something that any of you guys can do at home. You can go home right now, download SketchUp, download GIMP, and you can make this. It's as easy as that.
But you still had to paint. You said you still had to paint it first.
Yeah, yeah.
So you
Well, it's always
painted
good to it's always good to have a blueprint to start with.
Yeah.
I mean, you would never design a car
And
straight
then
off.
how did you get that blueprint into the program?
Yeah. Start off with a blueprint. I had the idea. We actually started this from the final design already. We knew what Tintin's apartment was going to look like. We had this concept design already done. But it's going through that whole process first with the director saying, okay, are we heading down the right direction with Tintin's apartment here? Is this looking okay? So yeah, it is. And then we took that stage and we built the model around that picture.
Right.
Yeah. It's hard to describe, but there's this thing that you see in front of you. It's all just textures stuck on very, very basic shapes. It's actually faking things like shadows. The shadows that you see there aren't rendered at all. Those are painted on. I saw that
Painted on in the program.
in the program. Oh, using Photoshop again. Because everything that you see, say that wall at the back there,
Yeah.
that wall is one texture.
Right.
You don't, when you see those shelves, you think that's a 3D shelf. That's just a painting.
Right.
Yeah, everything is just an illusion in many ways. Like the oven looks like it's three-dimensional with the towel in front of it. That's just painting again. There's some parts where you do need 3 dimensions, like this chair here. But other parts like the clock on the wall, it's totally flat. Picture's flat. That ship over there is just several layers of flat. So to make the sails look like they're overlapping.
If you're going to draw, because I'm going to draw I'm great with visuals, so in considering moving things around, could you take photos and look at it, find
Yes,
it,
definitely.
take the photos and then put them
Oh yeah, most definitely. In fact, I mean, Google SketchUp hasn't really been used to this level before. You'll see it on the Google World, where you'll see buildings which are sort of roughly made up, and they have the images of the buildings and all that sort of stuff, and you go, oh, that's what we like. This is using that same idea of taking it one step further. We're actually using it as an art tool instead of just a tool to show the street down the road or what that building looks like.
Good interior designers use it.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, and it's free. That's the scary thing about it. It is totally free. There's no reason that you can't go out there and
Are there
actually
courses that can
There may be. I'm not sure if there are. I mean, I just learned through trial and error.
Yeah, it's time.
Yeah.
There's really good online tutorials for Google SketchUp as well.
Yeah.
So, all sorts.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's a wonderful program. It is
I've got
amazing.
it, but I get a bit overwhelmed every time I sort of start
Yeah.
trying to play with it.
Well, start with small projects to start with. I mean, the worst thing you can do is sort of start saying, okay, I want to design a whole world, and then you go, oh crap, I don't even know how to make a pencil. You know,
Yeah.
you start with the small things like a desk. You know, a desk. Take a few photos of your desk. Say, pick out a certain piece of furniture that's very basic and square shape. Take photos from various angles, and see if you can actually start putting those textures on a 3D model. And you can notice things like shadows straight away. You'll see a place and the shadow just doesn't look right. So paint into that area where you put the texture and make a shadow. Fake it up.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Because that's the thing is that out there, the world, the digital world out there now is so open to everyone like yourselves and myself that I can go home and make a film on my own computer. There is no limit at all. The only limit is imagination, and everyone knows there's no limit to your imagination. So, I mean, Google SketchUp is a fantastic tool, and it's totally free.
And you rub out. Oh, sorry.
Oh, this thing, it's a case of, with your drawing program you can rub out. With this, it's a case you just take objects away or blocks away. So imagine it's all made up of blocks and circles and things like that. That's all this is.
Right.
So that ability to move your iPad around so you're moving around an actual room, is that part of SketchUp?
Unfortunately, no. We had to actually get people to figure out how to do it overseas. There was this
So
company.
that's like a Weta in-house specialty.
No, I know. Well, Weta Digital does a lot of that kind of stuff where they come up with innovation and things like that. But Weta Workshop, we're sort of like the slightly cheaper, slightly dodgier brother. We come up with nice, cheap ways of doing things, but still effective. If this was done at Weta Digital, it would probably be a very expensive job, and they get lots of model makers in. Using Maya, which is a very expensive program to buy, and get lighters and all that sort of stuff. We didn't have time to do that for the SAT. We had a tight deadline. So I said, well, let me play around with SketchUp for a week, see what I can do. And I came up with that, and it turned out to be perfect. It's great. Because, I mean, the worst thing you can do is think that expensive tools make a good product. It's not expensive tools. It's the way that you actually use cheap tools and see how far you can push a cheap tool. When I was doing cartoon portraits at shopping malls, I used to use a huge, thick, black vivid pen to do all of my line work for it. I do colour pencil as well as colour. But people would see this huge pen, it was a big fat thing with a big nozzle on it, and say, how can you use that to do the fine artwork? And it's just the way you hold it. You know, you hold it on a slight edge, on a slight corner. Or if you want a fat line, you hold it down like that. If you want sort of dots, you do the corner. And it's the same thing with this. People see Google SketchUp as just things for doing buildings and stuff like that, or, you know, very solid construction buildings that already exist. This is proof that you can actually use it as an artistic way of putting your ideas across. So there's no limits at all. And just keep an eye out for all of this sort of stuff, because there's new programs like Google SketchUp coming out every single day. There's someone out there that's coming up with a new version of some artistic thing which would be really cool to use. And then it finally comes out and they think, oh, I can do this small thing with it. But quite a bit of the time they don't realise just how far you can expand that idea and how big a tool you can actually make this. I mean, we haven't even told Google about this yet, because we haven't had the chance. But if they saw this, they'd probably go all crazy because, oh, hey, it's a new market. So, hey.
With regards to your current job there, how much of it is physical drawing as opposed to on the computer, and then also sculpting?
Well, quite a few of us actually work in different ways. We've got a big sculpting department which work totally with modelling with clay. We've also got a sculpting department which work with ZBrush and 3D modelling programs which they use on the computer.
When you say big, I mean, I know it would have meant, but I know it depends on what projects you've got in, at the moment, or at any one time.
Yeah.
But when you say big, sort of how many people?
It all depends. I mean, it depends on the size of the project. To give an idea. Well, the idea for, actually, what I can say is that the Weta Workshop Design Conceptual team is the largest conceptual team in the world at the moment. There's about 26 of us in a room, and that's unheard of in other film companies. Usually what happens with other film companies is that they hire guns for hire. In many ways, I am still a gun for hire. I'm actually contracted to Weta Workshop as a freelancer, but I've never run out of work for the past 14 years. So pretty much I've worked for Weta Workshop. And so with the workshop design team, we're made up of sculptors, as I was saying, and there's the 3D sculptors. The sculptors, we've probably got about 6 sculptors, physical sculptors. We've got about 3 or so digital sculptors. The rest of us work on computers or using pencil as well. I like to use pencil myself to start off with.
Are you an artist?
Yeah. I've always loved drawing. Yeah. When you're going to go around my family house, and my mum has never had the heart to wipe out little smiley faces I drew when I was before the war. You see those around that high. So yeah, exactly. I just graffitied in different places. But it's a case of again just putting across that whole point, which is whatever way you can get your idea across is a good way. You don't have to be artistic. If you can make it using Lego models, go for it. You can actually use little Lego models, take a photo of it, and then put the textures of the photo that you put in there. It's whatever gets that idea across. Don't be held back. Don't be ashamed of putting something which you feel isn't a high-end product. You know, it's all ideas. And another good thing is to explain these ideas to the director as well. Don't rely totally on your picture. You want to get your image across and you have a whole bunch of ideas, like that creepy dude that we saw before. You know, an average director would see that and go, oh, it's creepy, and turn the page. But you can actually put notes all around this character as well, pointing out all of those things. In fact, there's some directors which love that stuff because it shows that you care about the project. You're not just seeing it as another job. I mean, I do it for every single bit of artwork that I do because I've got heaps of ideas that I want to share with the director which may help expand the vision of the film. I mean, there's cases where I've written down things which have helped expand an environment, which have helped expand where that section of film is, which has helped expand that section of the script. It's just a carry-on event.
With TinTin, how many man-hours do you think was spent in the conceptualising process?
Conceptualising process? Well, for conceptual design, there was, at the start we had about a team of 9 people working on it full-time, but that dropped off after about a couple of months to specifically 4 people. There was 4 of us. There was myself, there was an artist called Frank Victoria who was French-Canadian, so he knew books really well, which was very useful. Rebecca Tish, who had come straight out of school, and she got a job at the workshop because she was so talented. And then there was Rob Baldwin, who was English, and he also knew the books really well. And through the 4 of us, we did quite a bit of the artwork. So we worked on the film for 2.5 years conceptually designing that film. And then we had to pass it on to Western Digital to do their thing.
Can I just ask, you said you worked on Black Sheep, is that right?
Yeah.
Given that obviously that's a different style of film from digital animation, what did you do on Black Sheep and what were the ways that you communicated that to the director?
Well, the main design jobs that we had to do on Black Sheep was what the hell is that wear sheep going to look like? I mean, it's a tricky one because you need to, the director, Jonathan, he's scared of sheep, he hates sheep. He's absolutely petrified of things. He said, look at them, they've got this weird gummy thing and it's open mouth and it just looks disturbing. So he said, I want other people to be as scared of sheep as I am of sheep. So I want the were creature, the were sheep, to look as disturbing as possible. And so we did a whole range of different were sheep designs using all those techniques I explained before, like lighting, you know, put them in moonlight with the moon behind and coming down and you hide his face in shadow and add all those atmospherics. Blood is always a useful thing. You know, splatters of blood make something look rather gruesome for understandable reasons. We also had to figure out the transformations from an average person into the were sheep. The guy said, the director, he said, we want to have it so that it's not just an easy transition, it doesn't go like that. It has to be sort of like a collection of just bizarre things because after all, it is a guy turning into a sheep. You know, it's not exactly a conventional thing. And so we had cases where we drew one side of the guy's face turning into a sheep and stretching his mouth like that and back there. And it's basically coming up with the craziest ideas, but again, using all those old cliches to try and get the emotion over.
So you were essentially helping him plan out his shots and how he was going to portray that happening. So he didn't quite have an idea, but it was your drawings that were bringing out those things like lighting and
exactly. Because quite a bit of the time the director is not sure how he's going to do some scene either, and he relies on us to come up with an idea of some sort. That's why I mean, another thing that I highly recommend is, as well as the research into all the things to build, you know, like tools, desks, antiques, all that stuff. Research techniques as well. Learn as much as you can about the film industry and how everything works, because it will help you in the end. Because you, as concept artists, you're being not just an artist, you're being a production designer, you're being a costume designer, you're being a cinematographer, you're being a director, you're being a producer because you have to figure out if there's enough money to make what you're designing. You're doing all of these jobs all in one picture. Sure, it's not doing it for the whole film, but you're doing it for this picture, and you have to have a good sense of how everything works.
Do you think producers these days are becoming much more aware of their budget line for
Yeah.
conceptualisation?
Yeah,
I
very
mean,
much so.
it's something that wasn't always factored in. Or,
Quite a bit of
I mean,
time.
it's storyboarding, but not.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I mean, quite a bit of time you get producers that say, let's make this film really easy, but just make it so it's like, $2,000. We don't need that many designs, but they don't actually think of the big story. You end up with guys running around with tinfoil belts and stuff, and it looks dodgy as hell. That's because the producers don't realise just how much work goes into designing a film sometimes. Thankfully, there's a whole range of producers out there that do know this stuff. I don't know, I think I said something contentious there.
Oh,
No.
At the moment.
But, what time do we finish on this thing?
12:30.
12:30?
Yeah.
I asked a question, like, I guess my experience with that stuff, it's been kind of small team. There's a certain amount of happy accident that happens that will be out roving around. You see something with the lens, or you put something together, and that's it, that's magic, and away you go. How do you feel like, how has it changed that you're part of, the bigger that you get, the more prep, the more detail everyone needs, everything needs to be ticked off, everything needs to be signed off. Do you still feel like you get creative flow and space and dynamics happening?
Yeah.
Like, I guess it kind of almost makes me, because I like the creative adventure that happens.
Oh, that's the cool thing. I mean, the fact that I actually did work in this large design team is beautiful because it's not me stuck in a little room. Even though I have got a cubicle that I work to because I hate people looking over my shoulder sometimes. But the fact that we've actually got a team that we can go out and say, what do you guys think of this? Is this good? Any other ideas? And sometimes we get together as a group and say, you should try this with this guy or try this with that. And just bouncing those ideas off people help a hell of a lot. It's great. And it ends up being a better product at the end as well. Being open to anyone's suggestion is always good. Even
You've got a lot
kids.
of freedom there, obviously, before you take it to the...
Yeah, very much. I mean, in many ways, the concept art phase is the most fun phase because we get to go crazy with the ideas. Even if it goes beyond the budget in your picture, you still had a fun time coming up with that idea. The Titanic crashing on the Empire State Building and things blowing up. It'd be great. Only got $50,000, can't do it, but it was fun drawing it. It was cool, But it is. It's still a very, very fun job. It's still very, very free, and that's the best part about being a filmmaker is finding those happy accidents because it's what makes us enjoy our jobs, and we always want to work at the job that we enjoy. Yes.
How do you, your relationship with the production designer, where do they pick up and where do you keep on working through, all the way through with the production designer who of course is actually going to run the team that's going to do the work?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it all depends on the project.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, TinTin was a weird one because there was no real production designer. It was the strangest project to work on because in many ways we were production design in our concept design phase. And so we kind of started off the ball rolling, and then we had Kim Sinclair came on board, and he's an incredibly skilled art director and production designer, and he brought all of our pictures back to some sort of reality, which is what was needed, because otherwise it was pie in the sky stuff happening all over the place, and he was a good way of controlling it all. And so that what happens usually with a film is that the production designer will work with us, and he'll be the person to speak between the director and us, because he'll have some very distinct ideas. Sometimes directors, I love directors, I love to be a director myself sometimes, but someday in the future, but sometimes directors have absolutely crazy ideas. There's some ideas that you go, what on earth were they thinking? But you have to respect that whole director thing as well. You show their idea and you paint it up, and quite a bit of the time production designers say, okay, this is what he said, so you have to draw it, but if you've got a better idea, draw that as well. Because after all, you have to respect the fact that the director got to where they are because they've done a hell of a lot of hard work usually. They haven't just sort of fallen into place and say, hey, I'm a director. You know, that might happen in some cases, but most of the time they've worked hard to get to where they are. So you have to respect that work that they've done. And so you draw their idea to the best of your ability. And then if you have a way that may help that idea, you don't say, here's a better idea. You say, here's another concept that I had that might help this scene. And most of the time the director will go, actually that's really cool. Let's try incorporating that and maybe putting it with this. And it ends up being better because it's that combination of everyone working together to make a better product. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Oh, that's good. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was wondering, did you guys design the stereoscopy as well or not?
Sorry?
Did you design the stereoscopy on TinTin?
The
3D, that's CG.
Oh, the CG and stuff like that. That was thankfully left to the Western Digital guys to work
No,
out.
I was meaning the stereoscopy.
Yeah, the actual 3D.
Yeah, the 3D, not
Yeah, we left that to the Western Digital guys.
So you didn't make the drawing in an agri or something?
Oh, actually we did, yeah, in many ways. One thing that we noticed with Steven Spielberg is he loves shooting through things. He loves having things, even when he was working in 2D, he loves having things passing in front of the camera, things that he can look through because it adds a feeling of depth. And so there was actually stages in concept art where he said, oh, it'd be great if we actually had some hanging chains down the front here so we could actually have those hanging chains and then swing over. And he'd be doing these sort of hand movements all the time so you could see that he was moving around in his head, how he wanted things to be pictured. And so we put big foreground elements in the pictures and then background elements to give as much depth as possible. And that helped some of the guys over at Western Digital say, okay, we need to really up the 3D at this moment, or what do we want to focus on? Yeah, it's things like that telephone thing I was showing before, the focus on the telephone. It's those sort of thoughts as well that the 3D guys have to figure out whereabouts do we put that focus. It's a whole other kettle of fish which I haven't thought about touching myself because it's scary. But yeah, it's a huge kettle of fish. Hey.
Given how good TinTin was, I mean, I
Oh,
just
thank you.
absolutely loved
That's a good start.
loved it. I was really surprised that it was locked out of the Oscars.
Oh, it's one of those things. I mean, we didn't feel so bad about it because we hit home in Europe, which is where TinTin essentially is Belgium.
It just absolutely.
Yeah,
I couldn't understand it.
it's kind of it's a weird time at the moment. Motion capture is still seen as it's not a valid form of acting or animation. They kind of see it as, well, it's neither in this camp or in this camp. They don't know where on earth to put it.
So it was more of a technical. I mean, because obviously apes got it.
Yeah,
Apes
it's
got
really
it,
hard
but
to say.
TinTin wasn't, and it was just like.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, I can't. I mean, I've got my personal view on it, but I don't know if it's right or wrong. But in many ways, I sort of feel that it was a case of it couldn't be voted for best animated feature because it had people in motion capture suits. So they say, oh, well, that's not animated. So that's guys in suits. But the real fact, as well as those people in motion capture suits, there was actually a hell of a lot of animation to make sure everything moved right. I mean, the fact that if a woman had a plait or something moving in the back, that wasn't just motion capture, that was someone actually making sure that plait moved right. And the water effects. Snow was totally animated.
Do you think they need to have a different category or start thinking about having a different category?
It's one of those things. I mean, it's like the Olympics. Which sports do you drop out and which sports do you keep in? I mean, they keep talking about should we have ballroom dancing as a sport at the Olympics? But then if you do, which sport do you drop out? You know, there has to be one to replace. And it's the same with the Academy Awards. I mean, if you did have something for best motion captured film, you'd have to be guaranteed there was a big collection of motion capture films to nominate to start with. Otherwise, you'd sort of have one film popping up and say, and the nominee is, oh, and he's also the winner. You know, so it's a real tough one. I don't know what's going to happen with motion capture in the future. Will it actually get to a stage where people will feel comfortable about voting for something like that in the Academy Awards? I just don't know. It's hard to say. But it is very much, it's some sort of weird, contentious area at the moment. It's unlike anything else out there at the moment, so it's a tricky one. Yeah, but thank you for your nomination. I think we're pretty much done. If there's one final question, I might be able to answer it, guys. If not, I'll let you go free.
I've got one.
Cool.
Just with regards to TinTin,
Mm-hmm.
and if a director like Steven Spielberg is on board, at what stage does he come in to get, conceptual design? Because obviously the characters and the environment's probably one of the first things. Where's the script at that point?
Script at that point was non-existent.
Okay.
Yeah, we had the books, we had the original books for TinTin. We had those books there, those were basically our Bible, they were canon. Any time we designed something, we went to those books as inspiration. Even small background characters like extras, we went to the books to see if we could find someone in the background. There was one character that we designed where he only appears in one panel of the books and he's only about 5 millimetres tall. You see his face, but we used him as an extra because we knew that all the Tintin files out there, or the Tintinologists, I should say, that know Tintin inside out would be getting book Blu-ray and pausing it and studying every single part and checking.
Yeah.
And so at our design phase, we knew, we knew at that early stage, we better do our job in concept design really well. I don't know what happened over at Weta Digital, whether they carried that on. I think they did. But at concept design, we knew early on that we have to live up to the expectations of the Tintin fans.
So you would pass that over to Weta Digital, and then Weta Digital would give it to the production designer. Then they emailed it across to Spielberg.
No. Steve Spielberg would come on the conference calls every week.
Right.
And it was basically like a big boardroom meeting.
And you could hold up the...
No, we have it all in digital form. But like what I've done here tonight.
Right.
Oops. Straighten it up. So I don't look drunk. First images. It's a case of Stephen would come on a big TV down the end of the table. We'd have Peter Jackson down there. We'd have Joe Lettieri, the head of Weta Digital there. Richard Taylor over here. We had a whole team of animators back there. And I was kind of stuck in the middle there as well, and feeling slightly intimidated, as you can imagine. But it was just like a board meeting, having Stephen sitting at the board table as well. And we'd flick up images and say, what do you think of this, Stephen? Is this heading in the right direction? And say, yeah, this is great. I mean, the most entertaining one that we had, meeting that we ever had, was when they were discussing Snowy, what Snowy should look like. Because we were discussing how curly should we make his fur. I mean, he's a fox terrier, but he's unlike any other fox terrier. How curly should we make his fur? And Stephen went, hang on a second. He called his dog and said, here's my dog, look at the fur and all this. He ended up pushing the dogs towards webcams with this huge dog face. Dog eyes popping off in different directions. And Peter goes, that's quite good fur and everything. Actually, has anyone else got a dog around here? And Richard said, I've got a poodle back in the workshop. And Pete said, actually, poodle's got really good fur. Could you get the poodle over here? And so we ended up with a poodle being brought forward. And we ended up with probably the longest dog-to-dog conference call because Pete was holding up the dog on this end, and Steve was holding the dog. And everyone was just cracking up laughing.
Which dog has it got?
Yeah, which dog has got the more Snowy-like thing? The cool thing with people like Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson is that they're still kids, that they love ideas, they love entertaining people, they love having fun with their job. And Richard is just a big kid. He's the greatest guy out. When he gave me a chance, and I had no experience in film at all. And so, if I can pay him back for anything, I'm more than willing to do it, because without him, I'd probably still be sitting in a shopping mall right now having pickles thrown at me from food court. So he's fantastic. He's so open, and he's one of those guys that if he has a choice between talking with politicians over there, higher politicians or kings or queens, or students over there that want to know how to get in business, he'll go to the students and help them out. I mean, that's in many ways why I wanted to come here today as well, is because I'm sort of trying to pass on the experiences that I've learned as well in this business. And it's the way that this community needs to keep going forward. We need to learn off each other's mistakes, especially in New Zealand. Because so often New Zealand, the attitude is we make a mistake and we go, that didn't work very well. Get that, they want to push it to the side. But we need to actually embrace those mistakes and figure out why did that mistake happen. It's going back to that good films, bad films thing I said before. Watch all kinds of films and look at them critically and decide what is it about this film that I like, what is it that I don't like. And once you take those on board, you can learn from other people's mistakes and do better work yourself. I think it's a good way to start. Makes me sound slightly intelligent. Cool.